Welcome to Shorr Solutions, the podcast. I'm your host, Jay Shorr. I'm the CEO and founder of Shorr Solutions, a national and award-winning consulting firm assisting aesthetic and surgical practices with their operational, administrative, and financial success. I have an amazing team of practice management experts and clients across the U.S., and as an industry expert with firsthand experience owning a multi-million-dollar cosmetic dermatology and plastic surgery practice, listen in as I lend you my expertise and best tips to successfully manage and grow your aesthetic practice. I will also be bringing in guests along the way, so get ready to be equipped to operate your aesthetic practice strategically and profitably. Welcome to Shorr Solutions, the podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of Shorr Solutions, the podcast. And I'm your host, Jay Shorr. And today I have a special guest, Cristian Devoz. And Cristian is a client success manager and operations manager here at Shorr Solutions. And please allow me to welcome my own team guest, Cristian Devoz.
Thank you, Jay. I'm really happy to be once more in the podcast with you. So I'm excited about today's conversation.
Great. Cristian, you and I are going to be speaking about how to coach your team and improve their phone sales skills. Now, look, coaching is about everything, whether it's in athletics, whether it's about parenthood, whether it's about being a team leader. You know, in other podcasts, you may have heard the difference between a boss and a leader. And I say, I don't want to be a boss. I want to be the leader. I'm the team leader of my team. Even if they're junior associates, junior partners with me, I always just want to be the team leader along with my colleagues. And we have to coach them in how to improve their sales skills, because everybody's going to say, oh, I know how to sell. Believe me, I know how to sell. But you know, the real results, the proof is in the pudding. And really, when we go, we look at KPIs, key performance index measures, and we look at the results, you know, we talk about the conversion cascade that we produced. And the conversion cascade is pretty simple, right? It's about how much marketing dollars do we spend, whether it's on radio or TV or PPC, pay-per-click, organic marketing, our website, newspaper, don't laugh, yellow pages. We don't do those anymore. But seriously, all the money that we spend, it's supposed to drive a lead. And then what do we do with that lead? If we don't do it in time, we're going to speak about this in a little bit, you know, because we've got to get them in for the consult. And from the consult, we've got to convert that to a treatment. All right. And we still haven't made any money yet. And from the treatment to the revenue and the retreatment and upselling and how to bring our patients back for more. So let's talk about real quickly, what steps should we as practice owners take before coaching a team member? All right. Let's talk, Cristian, about reviewing a practice goal.
Absolutely. So before you can even start coaching your team, you need to know what you're going to coach them on and what's the focus of that coaching. So if you don't have specific, clear, and concise practice goals, when you go into that coaching session, where are you going to direct that conversation? So before you even get with your patient care coordinator or before you get with your phone people, your phone staff, you need to make sure that you have proper goals, that you also assess the performance for each of these staff members, because they have strengths and weaknesses. And you got
opportunities.
That's right, opportunities. And these areas of opportunities, you gotta work with them on improving those for sure. But you also don't wanna just talk about what they are doing wrong all the time. So you need to make sure that you assess their performance, understand who they are, what they're good at, and then set those goals, set those expectations of what you will be looking at when you coach them. Let them know, look, this is our practice goals. This is what we want to achieve. And what I want you to do is to have this high quality patient experience for each and every lead that comes to the practice, if that's your goal, of course. But at the end of the day, what you want to make sure is that you have the foundation in place before you start having any type of coaching program with your staff.
Great. So let's talk about that for a second because you mentioned a little bit, and I'm going to combine two things. Number one is setting an objective, and number two is preparing the resources. All right. Because if you don't give somebody the resource and they'll be able to sell, in other words, we don't have a proper phone, we don't have phone scripts, we don't have quote sheets. All right. Then everybody is squandering. So let's talk about setting an objective and then preparing the resource.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you mentioned the resource portion of that because you definitely want to have a proper phone system. Because how are you going to coach your team if you don't know how they are performing in the calls? You need to be able to listen to their calls. And in order to do that, you need to have a phone system.
Naturally, we have to adapt a collaborative mindset. And what do I mean by that?
Hmm.
We have to agree because you mentioned something that's very important, and
Hmm.
that is don't tell people what they're doing wrong.
Hmm.
All right. I consider that opportunity. We have a collaborative mindset, and this is the goal that we want to reach.
Hmm.
So we need that mindset. Prior to joining Shorr Solutions, Christian,
Hmm.
you were a supervisor at a call center. So naturally, it's selling. It may not be selling a product, but you were problem solving, whether it
Hmm.
was in the healthcare industry, whether it was in the billing and they would call you. That's selling. You had to solve a problem. Let's talk about that. Your team that you supervised, what did you find that were some of the opportunities that were being missed?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, many times, and this is something that I still see even with our clients when we work with them. But back when I was working as a supervisor, I used to see a lot that people will sometimes forget the customer experience portion of the call. Like they might know the script, they might know what they're supposed to say, but maybe the way that they're saying it is not the best way. Maybe their tone of voice is not appropriate, is not friendly. They sound like you're in an interruption to their day. It sounds like they are just flat tone and they are not having a good time when you call them, right? And I always coach people on when you answer the phone call, the first thing you need to do is smile. Do that smile check. Have a mirror if you want behind your computer so you can always look at yourself and make sure you're smiling because that's going to help you sound more friendly. It's going to help you even sound better. And something that I also notice that people forget is having the information from the patient at the beginning of the call. Like they will answer the phone call and they will say, Shorr Solutions, how can I help you? You didn't give me your name. You didn't ask for my name. So now I'm gonna say, hey, I'm calling because I need this, procedure that I'm thinking about. If it is a practice, let's say that it's a practice, and I wanted to find out more about it, how much you guys charge, etc. And then I'll say, oh yeah, we charge this much for that procedure, and this is, the answer to your question. And then the patient is like, okay. And I have noticed that nowhere in that conversation up to that point you have even asked the patient's name, you haven't even tried to gather their information, phone number, in case that the call disconnects. So that's another issue I noticed back when I was working at the call center. People will sometimes forget
So
important steps like that.
So what I noticed is you made that comment with an open-ended question. How can I help you? How should you answer the phone?
Well, I would probably say, thank you for calling Shorr Solutions. This is Christian and I can help you. You want to make sure that you're giving that statement because it's going to make them feel that you are the right person that is going to help them, solve that problem or get them to that procedure that they're looking to book, or just basically give them the answer to what they need, give them the solution. You can help them. That's what you're telling them.
So you're going to give them a sure solution?
Yes, we're gonna give them a Shorr
There
Solutions.
we go. Pretty catchy, don't you think?
Yeah, that's pretty
All
cool,
right.
right?
You think that was coincidental that we came up with that name for our company, right?
Right. It's just a coincidence.
Right. So, Christian, how do you set up the right systems to record and review your team calls?
Well, first of all, you need to make sure that you have a phone system, right? So if whether that's Weave, which is one of the many phone systems out there, and or any of the others, and basically what you need to make sure is that it has the ability to record the calls. And ideally, it should also have the ability to let you know analytics, like how many calls are being answered, how much time is passing before the staff member will answer that call, because sometimes the phone rings one, two, three, four, 5 times, and
Uh-oh.
patients might get impatient at that point and they might hang up. So how quickly are you answering the phone? You got to make sure that you have that also in there, in that phone system, that allows you to know, is my staff answering right away? Are people waiting on hold for too long? That's another
Uh-oh.
one. And and a little comment about the hold time. Sometimes you're on hold and you don't hear, maybe you hear a little bit of music, sometimes you don't hear anything, and that could be a missed opportunity. Even in hold times, which shouldn't be that long, you should have some kind of messaging talking about your practice during that time. So I had to make a little note on that. But yeah, things like this, you need to make sure that your phone system is able to do, to track analytics, to allow you to listen to the calls, and that way you can have a good picture of what the team is doing before you get into that coaching session with them.
So how do you evaluate a team member's performance?
Well, then again, you got to establish KPIs. You got to establish what is it that you're going to be analyzing. What is the performance that you want them to have? So, for example, one of the key indicators of performance that I want to have is, I want to make sure that they have a good tone of voice. I want to make sure that they properly open the call. So did they say the name of the practice? Did they say their name? Did they gather the data from the patient? And then, of course, did they answer the patient's questions? That would be another metric that I would put in there. How knowledgeable are they answering the patient's questions without giving medical advice, of course? And then, of course, I also want to know, are they booking the consult? How good are they at converting? So that would be another performance indicator that I want to look at. What is the conversion ratio from that lead calling to actually booking the appointment? And then, of course, is that lead showing up to the appointment? So that's another conversion ratio that we also got to look at.
When do we start credentialing the provider of the procedure that the patient is calling in for?
As soon as possible. I mean, after you gather the patient's data and you answer their question, you also want to take that opportunity to start talking about the provider and why they can help them with that specific question. Sometimes, if it is a very medical question, you can even say, that's a great question to ask the doctor, who is very knowledgeable, very experienced. He has all these years of experience, all these awards. He's board certified, double board certified. That's a chance for you to basically talk very well about your provider, get the patient excited, saying, you're going to love Dr. Shorr. He's great with the patients. He gets really, really good results for the patients. We have amazing before and after. You can take a look at the website. I can send you, if you give me your email, I can also send you, some testimonials from many of our patients. And that could be a good opportunity for you to gather their email, which is also part of that process, right? You gotta get that information from the patient. So you got to do it as soon as possible. I guess that's the easy answer.
Well, thank you, Christian, for elevating me to a higher level than I really am. I do want to formally make a disclosure that I am not a physician. I know a lot of people, when we're giving examples, they'll refer to me as, well, Dr. Shorr, where I'm at a conference and I'm doing a lecture and people come up to me and say, Dr. Shorr. So I really do need to, as I always do at every conference, every lecture, make a formal disclosure. I am not a doctor. All right. So with that, moving on, I also want to share something that you had said, Christian. You talk about
Hmm.
credentialing the doctor, but it's not only the doctor, it's a physician associate, a PA, we can call them aesthetic physician associates. I know today the term mid level provider is no longer in vogue, but it's a nurse practitioner. It could be a physician assistant, physician associate, even an esthetician. All
Hmm.
right, because they provide wonderful services, like some in certain states they're allowed to provide procedures. So we also want to credential them. All right,
Absolutely,
because many
yes.
times doctors don't perform the procedures, they may just be the surgeons. I don't mean just, but they're performing the surgical procedures and they're allowing their additional associates to provide other types of procedures, right?
Absolutely, yes. Totally
So
agree with you. Yeah.
how do we track people's improvement? First of all, we can set a benchmark, right?
Hmm.
And we then have to check in with the people. And then we use performance reviews and review practice outcomes. So if you can speak with tracking their improvement, that would be a good place to go.
Absolutely. So let's say that, and I'll give you an example. That's the best way that I can explain this. So you start with setting the goals, setting all the foundations, setting the fund system. You give them the resources, you give them the scripts that they're gonna use, and you train them, right? You get them to know, this is what you're gonna be doing, and every month or every quarter, I'm going to be listening to your calls. You let them know that that's gonna be happening, and then as you listen to those calls, then you want to provide them the feedback from those monitoring sessions. And in the call center world, that's something that we call quality assurance. And I'm surprised by the amount or the number of practices that don't do quality assurance. And the doctor or the nurse practitioner or who, the practice owner doesn't know what's going on in those phone calls. And many times we have listened to some of these med spas or some of these aesthetic practices, surgical practices, and the staff doing things that are not very good practices when it comes to managing the phone. They are kind of rude sometimes, even in the tone of voice that they use for patients, and they don't even ask for the patient name until the very end,
If they do it all.
if they do at all, right? so so yeah, I'm impressed by that. But then of course, once you get into that coaching session, you want to meet with that staff member and say, I listened to your call, and you want to start with what I call the sandwich method, right? You want to make sure that you start with positives, let them know what they're doing well. I really like, your tone of voice. I really like how you answer the patient's questions. I like that you're always trying to book the patient, which I really think is awesome. But I noticed that there is an area of opportunity there. You forgot to credential me as a provider, which I believe is very important for the patient to know who I am, because they need to know that they're going to be in good hands. So maybe that's an area of opportunity that you can coach your staff member on. Or maybe at the end of the call, the staff member forgot to kind of recap the information, because another good practice, after you have scheduled the appointment, you want to recap to the patient. So your appointment is scheduled for this specific date at this specific time, and you give them all the instructions prior to the appointment so that they know what to expect. You let them know that you're going to call them to remind them. If you do text reminders, you let them know you'll be receiving a text message and you can confirm the appointment. Or if you need to reschedule, please let us know, especially if you have a cancellation policy. You want to make sure you let them know that if they don't show up, they might be charged, or depending on what your cancellation policy says, the number of dollars that might be. But you have to give them the option to, one, to confirm, two, to cancel, three, to reschedule, and then you give them those options, and the patient, at that point, can do that. But these are practices that you need to have with your staff member. They need to follow all of these things, follow the script.
So that brings me to another point. You mentioned something very, very important, and that is summarize the call. Because I have a favorite expression that I use: what I said is not what you heard. All right. Even though the same identical words were used, you may have interpreted it differently than what I said, even though you heard it, because you heard it the way you wanted to hear it. So, by summarizing the course of the conversation, yes, Mr. Christian, yes, Mr. J, we're going to schedule for this procedure on this date A at this location, because many of us have multiple locations. And therefore, we've had patients show up at another location at a time. All right. And with which provider and what service and the fee that we quoted you. The worst thing that can happen is a patient shows up believing they were going to be scheduled with one provider and they're scheduled with another. Next, another worst thing that can happen is they show up and the wrong procedure. They come up for a neurotoxin and they're scheduled for a filler. Next, the same provider can do it. However, it's embarrassing because it doesn't look like the left hand knew what the right hand was doing. And most importantly, no, I was quoted this price. All right. So it's great to summarize that right from the beginning. You brought up a very good point. So let's talk about what key performance measures, KPIs, really should we be looking for in coaching your team?
Absolutely. And I mentioned a few already, but another one that I would definitely mention would be conversion ratios. at the end of the day, the results is what really matters, right? Did they actually book the appointment? And then I will also look at having a structure for the calls. You got to have the structure of this is what the staff member needs to say. Did they say it? How did they say it? When did they say it? And I'll give you a structure that the audience can use out there. And it's basically gather, give, get. Meaning you start the call, you open the call very nicely with a smile. You give, thank you for calling Practice Surgery X. My name is Cristian and I can help you. The patient lets you know what they're looking for, and then you say, I'll be more than happy to help you with that. May I please just gather some information first? May I please have your name and a good phone number in case that the call disconnects? And you gather, that's the first step, you gather the patient's information, you gather their email, then you want to give, right? So now at this point, you start answering their questions. You start giving them the credentialing for the doctor. You start even asking them questions so that you can give them a good experience as well, so that they feel like, oh, okay, so they know what they're doing, and it feels like you are really maintaining the flow of the call. What you don't want to happen is for the patient to take over the call. And sometimes if you don't have a good structure to your phone script, to how your staff needs to be answering those calls, the patient will end up taking the control of the call. It's going to be all over the place. It's going to be crazy. You got to have a good flow in the call. And then, of course, you want to get them on the schedule. So gather information, give them information, and then get them on the schedule. And then, as I mentioned before, you want to recap the call, and then you want to ask at the very end, hey, is there anything else you need assistance with? Do you have any other questions? And at that time, they might say, hey, you know what? I wanted to ask as well, my husband is also interested on this and that. Do you think that they can do that at the practice? Oh, yes, absolutely. And you can even end up having more than one person coming in. Things like this happen, but you got to provide a really good service. You got to make sure that you're always asking, is there something else? Do you have any other questions? And always using pleasantries. If they give you information, if I ask for your name, you want to say, oh, thank you so much. And then you want to use my name, right, during the call. So if you ask me, hey, may I have your name? Cristian. Thank you so much, Cristian. I appreciate that. Cristian, by the way, may I have your phone number in case the call disconnects? Yes, absolutely. And by the way, Cristian, I would love to be able to send you some more testimonials and some of the before and afters from the doctor. Is there a good email that I could send you the information to? Absolutely. This is my email. Thank you so much for that. And those pleasantries, those thank you, I appreciate that. That also makes the patient feel very nicely, like you're actually having a really good Ritz-Carlton experience.
Wonderful. I don't know what you're selling, but I'm buying.
Oh,
Do you
man.
do you maybe suggest in the very beginning, until the staff during their training, until they get it right, having a checklist?
Yeah, absolutely. And even a script. Having a checklist, it could be, gather. What are they gonna gather? And then just first name, telephone number, email. What is it that you need from the patient? You also want to ask the patient, how do you hear about us? Because that's very important for analytics. Because if they say, you know what, I went to a conference, I saw you speaking, I loved it, or I heard from another doctor, who referred me to you, or maybe a friend of mine had a surgery with you, I loved her results, I want to get one too, or maybe I was on social media, on Instagram or TikTok. You want to know where they heard about you, because then you know what channels of marketing are working for your practice. So that's another question you want to ask them for sure.
Yes, we're going to take a quick break and a slight intermission. I'd like to take a moment to tell you about our Conversion Cascade online course. With this self-guided and powerful course, you and your team will be able to master acquiring and retaining more patients. As a step-by-step sales funnel training, this course is designed to help you and your team attract more patients, convert calls to consults, convert consults to treatments and procedures, and keep patients coming back for more. Not only will our Conversion Cascade online course help to strengthen and develop your team's phone sales and customer service skills, it will also serve as a valuable onboarding training tool for each and every new team member. Plus, in the course, you'll receive downloadable marketing checklists, phone scripts, conversion tracking tools, and more. So why not sign up for the course today? It only takes less than 4 hours to complete, and you can finish at your own pace, and you'll have lifetime access. And as a special thank you for being our podcast listener, we're giving you 20% off. Just enter the discount code podcast to start saving today. Click the link in our show notes to sign up for the Conversion Cascade online course. Acquire and retain more patients right now. Let's talk about how your team should structure calls to keep the flow and convert the leads. The first one, you mentioned a lot of that.
Mhm.
Thank you for calling, and then introduce yourself and the practice name. Good afternoon. Thank you for calling Shorr Solutions. My name is Jay, and I can help you with that closed ended comment to allow the receiver, the caller, to actually know they've called the right place and the person that answered the call is going to be able to help them. And you talked about gathering the information and credentialing the provider. That's the, part of the get and give. All right. And then encourage questions and know the answers. Present solutions clearly and ask open ended questions instead of just giving closed ended comments. So allow that prospective patient or an existing patient to feel they've called the right place. When you're summarizing, allow them to ask a lot of questions, but not really monopolize the conversation so that they're giving you all the information. They're calling you as the expert. And then lastly, book that consult and ask them if they have any additional questions to follow up, because that's really one of the most important things. If we don't get the consult, then that whole call was wasted. All right. Why don't we talk about the four magical closing questions, Christian? These are my
Absolutely.
favorites.
Yeah, and this is something that you can give your staff as your coach, as you're coaching them. You know, there are some questions you can ask patients, and we call them magical because they lead to continuing the conversation, potentially to actually converting that leading to a patient. Right? They tend to be very effective. For example, how long have you been thinking about having this procedure? Is one of them, and that gets them to talk. Right? Hey, yeah, I've been looking at getting this rhinoplasty for some time. I just didn't know who to get it with or if it was safe, and that gives you an opportunity to address their pain points, their concerns. So that's why it's a magical question, because it gets them talking. And then the other question would be, how does the thought of this procedure make you feel? And that's a great question, because you want to get them in a good frame of mind where they are actually very positive, and they talk about their emotions, and you get them excited about it, and that's going to be very good to get them to say yes at the end, right, to scheduling that appointment. How soon are you looking to have the procedure? That can also give you an idea of what they are thinking about, and maybe you can also address some of those questions that they might have about how soon they can get it. And then what's stopping you from booking your procedure today? I love that one, because they're gonna be like, okay, I don't know, let me think about it. Maybe I need to talk to my
There
wife,
you
or
go.
maybe I need to look at my finances. I don't know if I can pay for it. It's like, this is the problem. Now you gotta come up with a rebuttal to that problem, right? So the rebuttal is gonna be, if money is the issue, we have patient financing, which allows you to finance your dream procedure up to this many months, 0% interest, and that's something that we provide for our clients. And then, of course, if you have Cherry or you have Patient 5 or any of these other patient financing, your staff should know how to sell these ones and how to talk about them, to explain to the patient that there is another option. They can get the procedure, hopefully without having to pay any interest on that. And then they can still get it without having to worry about spending a whole lot of money up front. And then, of course, if the problem is I need to talk to my wife or my husband, then you want to ask follow up questions to that, because usually people say that when they basically want to find an excuse to get out of there. so, so you want to, you know, ask follow up questions to get them talking and maybe find the real concern. There is always a deeper concern than what they are telling you, and you want to make sure that you're probing and asking questions to get there. I heard once that there is 7 whys to get to the deep root cause of a problem. So maybe you have to ask, oh, and why is that, several times before you can actually get the real answer. So following up with those questions, and getting the patient to really give you the reason why they're not booking, so that you can then rebuttal and turn it around.
Let's move on.
Yes,
How do you give good feedback when you're coaching your team?
absolutely. So here's where we go into the actual coaching, right? So now you sit down with them, you let them know, okay, so I listen to your calls and I would love to listen to some of them with you. And then you can pull up a couple. If they had some calls that were really good, I would listen to those first just so that they can see how good they did on those. And if they after you listen to the call, then you want to ask them, hey, tell me about what do you think were your strengths there? How did you do? Oh, well, I think I did a good job on this and that. Okay, wonderful. I agree with you on that one. And what about areas of opportunity? What are some things that you feel like maybe I can work on this? And at that point, they will say, well, maybe I forgot, to ask the patient if they have any other questions, or maybe I could have said more pleasantries, I could have said more thank yous. Maybe I put the patient on hold and I just said, can you hold for a minute? And then I just left instead of asking the patient, is it okay if I can place you on hold? And then I come back from the hold and I just maybe just continue talking without even thanking the patient for waiting. And they will let you know, this is what I think I can improve on. And at that point, you can say, okay, I agree with you, and this are some ideas of how you could potentially improve. However, let me know, what do you think? How can you maybe improve that? And I will probably ask them that before I give them ideas. That's probably a better way to do that. So I will probably ask them, hey, how do you think you can improve that area of opportunity? And then at that point, you listen to them, and maybe you can take some of the things that they say and kind of help them set that goal. Okay, this is what you're gonna do based on what you feel that you need to do to be able to get to that next level, and you coach them in that way. You might also listen to some of the calls that they didn't do so well on, and you can also do the same exercise. What do you think you did well? What do you think you can improve? And always try to make it so that they feel they are part of the process and they are not just being told, this is what you did right, this is what you did wrong. It's more like, what do you think you're doing right? What do you think you're doing wrong? And how can you improve? And get them to where you want them to get, but let them get there by themselves without you having to pull them there, but you're kind of guiding them, kind of going, next to them and kind of walking that path together. You have to go to where they are to get them to where you want them to be.
All right. So let me summarize that. Number one, be specific. Number
Yes.
two, use that sandwich method. Positive opportunity, positivity again. I call it the kiss and kick. You call it the sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Be very nice to them in the beginning, share their opportunities, potential faults. I don't like to use that word. And then I know you're going to do a much better job going forward. Um, be timely. Don't start trying to coach people on something that happened so far ago, a long time ago. Make it timely right when the issue happens. And
Mm-hmm.
don't dilly dally, don't wander. Focus strictly on the solution. All right. Don't beat people up. Always
Mm-hmm.
stay positive with a smile. I think positivity draws a lot more success. All right. And then celebrate progress. That's really important. We have to celebrate the progress that we're all working with. All right. Now, those of you who are listening can't see this graphic, but those of you who watch it will be able to see how can you coach your team to prevent defensiveness. This graphic shows a picture of the Kansas City Chiefs, the two-time current reigning Super Bowl champions, and here's a graphic of Travis Kelsey, number 87, having a disagreement with his head coach, Andy Reid. Now, obviously, Andy Reid wasn't happy with the way the play went. However, Travis Kelsey is a receiver. This is even way, way, way before Taylor Swift and Travis Kelsey, were an issue or an item. I'm not using that graphic, just showing that two of the best, one of the best coaches ever in Andy Reid and one of the best receivers in Travis Kelsey have a disagreement, and how we have to coach the team to prevent the defense of this. One wasn't happy. And then once again, what we do is we share opportunity. And once you've coached your team, what's next? Is coaching done? No. Coaching is never done. And I want to bring this to a more personal level. with my personal mentoring student, Cristian Devoz.
Mhm.
I met Cristian a couple of years ago when I was lecturing in Cartagena, Colombia for IMCAS. And Cristian had a part time job for the weekend, and he was scanning badges in order to get into the conference room. And Cristian scanned my badge. He also walked in and listened to my lecture, but unbeknownst to me, Cristian wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I knew nothing about it. I just saw this young gentleman with a scanner scanning badges, and I left. And he happened to have seen my wife and spoken to my wife, saying, I really enjoyed listening to Mr. Shorr's presentation. And how could I get to be mentored like that? I came back the next day, and who did I see? I saw the same young man several years ago, all right, in Cristian scanning the badge again. And he had spoken to my wife, and my wife had shared with me that he would love for me to mentor him. Well, I love mentoring young professionals. And Cristian and I happened to have gotten to speaking. And at that time, he and I set up a personal coaching session as an older man and a younger gentleman, me and him. And every week we set upon aside an hour that we would do a video call so that I would be able to coach Cristian personally and professionally outside of Shorr Solutions. And very quickly, what I learned is that here is a young man that is like a sponge, wanting to learn, not ever inside aesthetic cosmetic surgery, but yet business. And he shared with me that he wanted to be a consultant someday, just like me. And I saw something, I actually saw myself 40 years prior, maybe even close to 50 at this point. And finally, I asked Cristian, would you be willing to be an intern? And I'll be helped because he is a collegiate student at that time with BYU, learning management and marketing for his degree. And I said, of course, I'd love to help you with financing. I'd love to help you with business. I said, would you mind being an intern, an unpaid internship with Shorr Solutions? And this way I can teach you. And he said, yes. From there, I'm going to turn it over to Cristian so he could explain that journey.
Yes, absolutely. And I always love when you tell a story. And from then on, it was just continual coaching and continual training. And when you have a staff member who wants to grow and you invest in them, there is something that happens. At least inside of me, it was appreciation, and I just felt like I was part of something greater than just a job. I wasn't doing the internship for credits, even though I did get some credits for college. For me, it was a matter of I want to grow, I want to learn, I want to get to that next level. And if you have a staff member who has that kind of attitude, you're very lucky because that's somebody who's going to be there and who's going to be willing to accept when they make mistakes. Because I have made many mistakes during that process, and Jay knows that. But I love the way that he has always coached me. He's always firm and with love. And I think that's very important when you're coaching your staff. You gotta love the people that you work with. You gotta make them feel that you care about them. You're not there to just tell them, you did this wrong and continually, fall on them. You wanna make them feel that they are part of a progress, that you're there to coach them, that you're there to help them grow, and that the reason why you're coaching them and giving them the feedback is not because they did something wrong, even though they may have done something wrong, but it's because you want them to be their best version. You want them to keep growing. So for me, it was like you were there at my corner. I have also other team members that were there with me during that process, helping me and coaching me. And very quickly, I grew to love this industry and I grew to love what we do. And one day I was like, hey, Jay, I want to get to the next level. I mean, I love marketing, but now I want to, maybe help clients. And then you brought me out to a business analyst, which I started helping them with financials. And together we put plans together for our clients that were planning to open a practice or who were trying to sell a practice. And we put all these different, exit strategies together. and all the financial aspects of that. And then I wanted to be even more involved with clients at that point, and you were like, you know what, you can be in all of my meetings, and I started shadowing you. So that's another important part about the coaching. You gotta show them how to do things sometimes, and the best way to do things with your example. So Jay did that, and I watched and I learned, and before I knew it, I started making comments in the meetings, and then I started leading the meetings, and now I'm working with the clients on a daily basis, and I love what I do, and I love being able to help them with the things that I have learned with Shorr Solutions and that I knew before with my experience working at call centers. Since we provide all these different trainings for our clients, including phone skills and conversion, lead management, all these things that we help our clients with are things that I have learned, throughout my life, with my previous jobs and now with Jay and through his mentoring. And I honestly want to say, once again, if you have somebody who's willing to learn, even if they are not good at the beginning, they might make mistakes, be patient with them, coach them, and invest in them. And believe me, it will bear fruits. And you got to make sure that they are the right person, though. And you got to test them sometimes. And if they show you that, you know what, I take ownership of my mistake, I am not defensive, I want to learn, I want to grow, then it's going to make it very easy for you to be very successful in the future. So that's what I want to say.
And I personally have, informally adopted Christian, his wife, and his baby as part of my family. We see each other every day, actually, because we're in meetings all the time. And when we're in conferences, whether it was in Cartagena, Colombia, or Sao Paulo, Brazil, or any of the others in Central South America, we're always together. And now Christian has his own base of patients. And most recently, he has become a client success manager and now an operations manager. So imagine coming from an internship to a business analyst to a client success and operations manager. And as of January of 2025, Christian will also be a partner at Shorr Solutions. So it has been a beautiful journey. And, the reason I mention this is strictly because I really wanted to bring to light and share all of the beautiful ways of training and coaching, because this was what this session was about: how to coach your team to improve their phone skills, but even more importantly, how to coach your team to be a better version of themselves. And for all of you practice owners out there, yes, it is your practice. For those of you who are med spa owners, yes, it is your med spa. Your team knows it. Don't be a boss, be a leader, be a coach. I don't know one professional athlete at the top of their game, whether it's Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady or LeBron James or Shohei Ohtani, you name it, Leon Messi. All right, I can go on and on and on in sports, but I don't know any of them that don't have a coach. And you don't have to be the best player to be the best coach. All right, I want to be a family. We call our team La Familia. All right.
Yes.
And that we treat ourselves like a family. So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes episode number 119: how to coach your team to improve telephone and sales skills. I would love to thank my teammate and partner as of January, Cristian Devoz. Thank you so much, and good luck, and God bless. So that wraps up today's episode of Shorr Solutions, the podcast. If we mentioned any website links, you can find them in our show notes. To work directly with me and our award-winning team of consultants to increase efficiency, increase revenue, and decrease costs in your aesthetic practice, schedule a free consult with us today. We will help you establish and refine your aesthetic practice's protocols for maximum efficiency and productivity, decrease your expenses, and increase your profitability with an expert financial analysis of your business, attract more patients, convert calls to consults, convert consults to treatments, and keep patients coming back for more with our sales training, coaching, and complimentary access to our Conversion Cascade online course. recruit, hire, and train new team members, and manage any staff turnover with our human resource expertise, plus more. Head over to our show notes and click on the link to schedule a free 30-minute consult with us today. And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to spread the word and share this episode with your friends, colleagues, and the rest of your team. Remember to also follow us on social media at Shorr Solutions and sign up for our e-newsletter. You'll learn about our latest tips, blog posts, services, videos, webinars, and more. Links to our social media channels and to sign up for our e-newsletter are in our show notes. So see you next time, and remember to leave us a review and subscribe for more valuable content.